This podcast was recorded before recent federal policy changes impacted many of the programs discussed and may not reflect the most current information.
Welcome to How to Not Kill Your Community, a podcast from the Delaware Community Foundation. In each episode, we interview experts to explore the choices we make as Delawareans, how we spend our taxes, steward our land, build housing, and how those choices impact the places we call home. What happens if we neglect our libraries, turn away newcomers, let philanthropy fade? Most importantly, how do we not kill our communities? I'm Stuart Comstock-Gay, President and CEO of the DCF. Thank you for listening. Welcome again. We are back to How to Not Kill Your Community, our podcast. I'm Stuart Comstock-Gay, and we're here in our beautiful office in Lewis, Delaware that we just love. And occasionally people may be looking in the windows behind us, but we're very excited today to have Ed Key with us. Ed is a native Delawarean, a nationally and internationally recognized expert on vegetable science who has dedicated his career to Delaware agriculture. And Ed was appointed by Governor Markell as Delaware Secretary of Agriculture and served for 8 years during the Markell administration. And before that, Ed spent 30 years with the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension as an agricultural agent, state vegetable crop specialist, and agricultural program leader. Also served as Director of Agriculture for Hanover Foods. An accomplished author, Ed has written extensively on agriculture and historical topics, including the books Saving Our Harvest, The History of Mid-Atlantic Canning and Freezing Industry, and Delaware Farming. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you. Nice to be on board.
It's very nice to have you here. So, Ed, as you know, the theme of this is how not to kill your community, and it's based on the ideas in this book, which is 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, kind of tongue-in-cheek way of looking at critical issues. And we thought, what a great topic to talk about, which is agriculture and land use. And because I think so often people don't pay attention to that, and we figured you're the guy to talk to us about it. So, Ed, let's start with the basic question. Why should we pay any attention? Why don't we just let it develop as it will and not worry?
A lot of good reasons, I believe. Number one, and not ranked number one, but first one that comes to mind is the economic impact of agriculture. I mean, it's our little state, it's a $2 billion a year cash farm income business. And the economists say that that multiplies by a factor of 7 or 8 through the economy. So now we're talking $14 to $16 billion helping support Delaware's economy. But the other thing is the environmental and the open space aspect of it all. We've got 2,100 farmers in Delaware, and the land mass of the whole state is 1.2 million acres, and agriculture is about, in farms, is almost half. It's about 46%. In other words, 520,000 acres are in farms, and 100,000 less than that is the cropland. So what I'm saying is there's 100,000 acres of forests, woodland, wetlands that are part of farms that keep the environment healthier and also just provide open space for all of us. So it's a combination of economics and quality of life.
So we need housing. Why not just build over it? We can go to Maryland and places for that nice open space.
Yeah. Of course, Delaware farmers are better than Maryland farmers, so we have to
Well
pay
said.
attention to that.
Good play.
But really, you know, when I graduated from college in 1973, there was about 640,000 acres of farmland. Now we're down to 510 or 12. And it's the atmosphere. To answer your question, there's a lot of development happening in eastern Sussex, just like in the 50s happened in northern Newcastle County. And, so the economic impact of farming, but also these are farm families. These are families. 98% of Delaware farmers are family operations. They may be incorporated for tax or generational transfer reasons, but they're family farms. And so they're making a great contribution. I just think, yes, I understand growth. I definitely understand homeless people and the need for housing, but let's do it intelligently and with a plan rather than just kind of haphazard.
So economics, let's turn to the economics of farming. As I mentioned to you, my family are farmers, but big farms in Nebraska, big corn farms. And one of the things that's happened over the last 50 years is the number of people farming has shrunk a lot, and fewer people own more and more. So how do we sustain these farm families who are doing relatively smaller operations in this time of consolidation?
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of Delaware. We have smaller operations. I could take you on a field trip and visit 4 farmers someday that started from scratch. And so it's happening. And it's primarily related to either fresh fruit and vegetable production and selling locally. Since about 2005 or 6, a great network of community farmers markets has evolved. And so that's giving farmers access to their local people. And the beauty of that, then you have non-farm people talking to farmers, and there's an educational thing going on there that's really neat. Out of that 500,000 acres of farms, the state has preserved 153,000 acres permanently. Now that's a good thing for that farm family, but it's also a statement that agriculture is important. And if I'm the CEO of a large poultry company or a tractor dealership, that nucleus that's being preserved and increased every year sends a signal that agriculture is important, and we have the threshold of farmland and farmers to keep it going.
Yeah. Let me pivot to a different question about farms and agriculture. Immigrants make up a lot of the workforce. Up to 70% of the workforce on farms is immigrants. So we're in a period where there's a lot of disruption in that, and that the number of immigrants is going to be shrinking. It already is. What does that do to the ability of farms to survive?
I think, yes, we have farms that are hiring migrant seasonal labor that are immigrants from several different countries, Guatemala in addition to Mexico and other countries. Farmers are turning to what's known as the H-2A program, which is a formal Department of Labor program where they can arrange to have farm labor come in from different countries. And what's interesting to me, we have farms that are traditional fruit and vegetable farms, and they're typically getting Hispanic labor through the H-2A program. We have farmers that are getting expertise and really good farm workers from South Africa and other countries that come from an agriculture. Those folks know how to drive tractors, know how to work the land, and how to fit in to a large, commercial grain operation. So, the other thing is, I'm an Irish kid whose great-great-grandfather showed up to get out of the potato famine. And, we're all immigrants, and I really, and there are beautiful stories in Delaware where an immigrant family will get associated with a farm and work there every year and maybe stay there and become a citizen and send their kids to great stories about sending their kids off to college and becoming citizens. So, I can get impassioned about immigration and all that, but it's important. And so far, the farmers are dealing with it and following the rules and doing it right. It just seems like the rules are changing, and that's worrisome, frankly. Not only for agriculture, but for a lot of industries.
Talk a little. I'm going to circle back to how people view farms, but talk about the avian flu. We're starting to see that here. What does this mean for Delaware farmers and their families and for all of us?
Well, in the worst case scenario, and it's hard to imagine the worst case scenario, but let's just say if avian influenza leads to a business closing phenomenon where poultry companies have to close and chickens are dying and the farmers lose that income, Delaware and the Delmarva Peninsula will become a much different place than it is now. Seriously, serious problems, serious challenges. And so that's why, and I'm optimistic on several fronts. The growers have learned and are enforcing biological control and don't go from farm to farm, wash your boots, take care of all the biosecurity measures you need to. I'm also optimistic, and this may sound hopeful, but there's a lot of great scientific expertise working on vaccinations and other medicines that can help prevent it, I hope. It's interesting, though, the poultry industry has turned towards antibiotic-free, and that's a direct response to consumer interest. So if you talk to chicken growers, and I'm privileged to have that entry point, they have changed their husbandry. Less birds per square foot, so if there is a sick bird, it's less likely to catch the flu.
Switching back to how the average citizen views farms and open space. You mentioned, people just drive by and say, "Oh, look at it, isn't that pretty?" How is that? Is that a dangerous perception? How do we pay attention so that people say, "I get it, farms matter"? Because a lot of us just go to the grocery store and say, "Oh, look, there it is," or it isn't. We're unhappy there aren't enough eggs or whatever. But how do we create a broader appreciation for what agriculture does?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll have a preface to say there are surveys in different states, even nationally by the USDA, that in general, the non-farm public generally thinks farmers are good people. And that comes from surveys. Yeah. But at the same time, the food in that grocery store is taken for granted because it's so plentiful and so available. So it is a big deal. And then when it gets to issues, one of the big issues is land use right here in Sussex County. Well, there are 588 chicken houses in Sussex County, and actually 588 chicken growers, not with some have multiple houses. The deal is we got to grow the corn to feed all those chickens. We have to keep open land to sustain the industry. And I think it's a huge educational thing. And, educate the people. One of the joys when I was Secretary of Ag and with the university was talking to the Rotary clubs, the Lions clubs, and bragging about agriculture and what they do.
Yeah. So you've written a lot about agriculture and history, especially in Delaware. What are some lessons from our history that we should be applying today?
I think the number one issue is what we just talked about, getting the non-farm community to understand the agricultural community. That's huge. The other thing is, I'd say, welcome new technology, new ways of doing things at the farm level, and understanding that those practices have been vetted by years of research, years of investment in research, and I mean at the farm level, at the food processing level. And I think the other thing learned from history is change. Change is always happening, and sometimes you just wish. I'm lucky enough to live on a 55-acre farm, and it's not going anywhere. Yeah. But on the other hand, my daughters, when I'm gone, say, "Hey, there's a pretty good offer for this land," and at that point, it's their equity, not mine.
Well, I'll say, I think a lot about that farmers often, that's the asset. That's the only asset you have to pass down. And so I don't know your situation, but many farmers say, this is the one thing I got to give my kids. That's it. And if my kids need the cash, who am I to say you can't sell it?
And there's that old saying, farmers are land rich but cash poor. And that kind of sums it all up.
Yeah.
So those are three things that have been consistent. The other thing is having local agricultural programs in our high schools, and then at Del State and at the University of Delaware and Delaware Tech, because farming is getting more complicated. The food industry is getting more scientifically, professionally complicated. So education is a big part of it too.
Yeah. I know our friend Rick Detweiler, who works at Cooperative, runs a little program where he brings people out to a farm and says, spend a couple of days to get to know what this is.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea.
It is. It is.
So agriculture is a big thing that it's kind of hidden for a lot of us, even though it's right in front of our eyes. And land protection and not just developing everything. And oh, by the way, we're the state that more of our state's going to be flooded than any other state proportionally with the rise in waters. We've got a lot we got to pay attention to with this.
We have a lot to pay attention to, including saltwater intrusion and sea level rise. But you got to be optimistic. And I think Delaware is kind of on the cusp. We need to make some good decisions about land policy, land use that's fair, and that's going to be a hard thing to do, but it needs to be done for the future. And just yesterday, I was on a farm. The guy is 70 years old. He has 2 sons in their 30s, and they're taking it over. And in the middle of all that development around Middletown.
Yeah, wow.
So, farmers can find a way. Farmers are wonderful people. They're resilient. They're very observant, and they love what they do.
Yeah. So we want to kill our community, ignore farm policy, and let it go where it will. But otherwise, we ought to be paying attention about what this means for our future.
Every non-farming Delawarean ought to be talking to a farmer at least 5 times a year.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome.
How to Not Kill Your Community is a podcast written and produced by the Delaware Community Foundation. Thank you to our producers at 1440 Film Company in Wilmington. The Delaware Community Foundation, DCF, stands at the intersection of generosity and community transformation. As experts in community need, we guide individuals and organizations to opportunities that impact causes they care about the most. We manage charitable funds, distribute scholarships, advise donors, and grant to nonprofits, providing leadership to cultivate the future of philanthropy in Delaware. Visit us at delcf.org for more information.